I've used my engineering background to come up with clever ways to be organized in the kitchen. I've used my professional cooking background to incorporate taste and professional techniques into home cooking. And I trained as a nutritionist during the pandemic when I had a bit of downtime to understand what makes a complete meal, what is healthy for us. And that's a continuous journey as well. I'm still learning about nutrition as one has to learn about everything. I think everything is always evolving.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. My guest today is a chef, but he wasn't always a chef, and we're going to find out all the other things that he does. He's multilingual. He has lived in, I don't know how many different countries, but we'll talk about that as well. We met this summer at the Global Women Summit, which is actually the Global Women Summit, but he's a man. So welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Gregory Schaad-Jackson.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you for being here and for taking the time. And also thank you, Mirella Sulla, for getting us together. How are you?
I'm great, actually. Today is a great day. I feel healthy, grateful, and happy to be here.
I think healthy and grateful they cover everything.
Yeah.
So you're also an inspirational chef, not just a chef.
Thank you. I like being positive, I think, and sometimes positivity can spill over to other people's lives, and so whoever we encounter, whether it's someone I'm cooking for or someone I just meet in the street.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now let's start from the beginning. I read that you were born in the USA, but your first name is Schaad, which sounds very Swiss. And then Jackson, I don't know, that doesn't sound Swiss at all. What is your story?
Well, I can also sound Swiss if you like. Then it's a bit more telling, but you can often tell by someone's accent where they're from, and people often a little bit stumped by me. I'm happy. I love talking about myself. I think that's the ego that likes to be massaged. But I was born in the USA to an American father and an Austrian mother. And they met in Geneva, in Switzerland. My American father was working out there back in the day. It was the 70s. He was exchanging engineering information. He came from a General Motors sort of background in Detroit, and he met my mother, fell in love with her. And then when they were going to have me, he wanted me to have American citizenship. So he flew over to the USA. So that I could have American citizenship. They popped me out and then flew back again to Switzerland.
I understand. So you were born in the US. So you have okay, that makes a lot of sense. But did you grow up in Geneva then?
So I spent the first 6 years of my life in Geneva, and when I was 2 years old, I lost my father to cancer. To lung cancer. He wasn't a smoker. He was a very healthy man, actually, from all that I know. And so my mother was a widow. So I grew up with a single mother for many years. And then when I was 6, she remarried to a Swiss man. Oh. And this Swiss man was called Schaad. And he adopted me because at the time my name was Jackson. He adopted me, but was happy for me to have both names of both my fathers as such. And so that's how my cross-Atlantic name evolved.
Wow. And it sounds posh to have a double name, doesn't it? I think that's perfect.
Yours is double-barreled too, indeed, yes.
So where did you actually grow up? You said 6 years. Where did you do your schooling after you left Geneva?
So my stepfather worked for a Swiss inspection company, a multinational company. And so they sent him to South America, to Venezuela. And so I spent 4 years living in Venezuela. And as a young boy of 6 to 11, it was a dream. There was jungle, there was beach every day, there was amazing fruit growing everywhere. And it was the glory days of Venezuela. The economy was doing great. Petrol prices were good. Everything was working. So I had an amazing time there, learned Spanish. And then he was posted to the United Kingdom, and we lived in London. And we settled there, and I spent all my educational years in England, and so that's where I studied, where I went to university, and started.
That is about as global as it gets. I mean, come on.
It's quite global. I mean,
It is.
I haven't covered Asia.
That is amazing. So you studied engineering.
That's right. Because my father was of engineering background, I thought, it'd be a good thing to study. I was more scientifically orientated as well, quite a mathematical mind. So that came a bit easier to me, even though I was good at languages as well. I wasn't as interested in studying languages. So I studied mechanical engineering and management at Edinburgh University in Scotland. And I had a wonderful time there. So it's a fantastic city. If you've ever been to Edinburgh, it's small, but it's also big. So as a student, it was a wonderful place. I made some great friends and learned a lot about life and independence and about engineering. And so I did a master's there. And as part of my year abroad, my master's year, I went to Germany, to Wolfsburg, which is where the Golf manufacturing plant is, and it's the largest, or at the time was the largest car manufacturing plant in the world. And I learned a bit more about engineering, and I realized I'm not so sure I want to work in a factory town for the rest of my life. So I got a postgraduate course in Cambridge University in manufacturing, design, and management. So I was starting to sort of explore different avenues at that stage.
So when your oven breaks or your cooker, can you fix it yourself?
So I am a very practical person. I like to understand how things work. So I will definitely have a go. And I'm not the kind of person that gives up easily. So I will keep trying. And I have at times just taken a whole device apart. And you're not supposed to, and so putting it back together sometimes a bit more challenging. But yeah, if it's a general fault that I can identify, I will repair it. Yes.
Where does the cooking come in, and how?
That's a great question, and that's maybe where it gets a bit more interesting for people, because engineering isn't that interesting. So at Cambridge, I was exposed to a lot of different recruiters and job opportunities. And so I ended up falling into management consultancy. So I worked for Deloitte Consulting, and they had a fantastic graduate trainee program. So they sent me to Phoenix, Arizona to do training there, back in the UK as well. And I got to see lots of different industries. I was sent to Germany because of my German mother tongue. I worked for Bayer, was one of our big clients. And
I don't have an answer for that.
Alexa always likes to chime in. And
fine, that's fine. Let her talk. She can participate in the podcast.
She sometimes might have something to add. And so Bayer was a really interesting insight into a global multinational company. And we were doing something called an SAP implementation, which a lot of consultancies do. And SAP is a global financial controlling system, which ties in with inventory, supply chain management, accounting, et cetera, et cetera. And one day I heard the partners of the company talk about the next SAP implementation, and they were getting really excited about it. And I was like, I don't get excited about SAP. And I certainly don't want to be like that when and if I become a partner one day. So I was always into cooking. I grew up with a mother that cooked a lot. She grew up on a farm, where her parents entertained royalty and diplomats from around the world in the sort of 50s. And so she was used to big banquets and entertaining. And so I was always around that growing up in Venezuela and in Switzerland. And then when I went to university, I started cooking for myself and really enjoyed it. And I invited people for dinner parties. And so I was always cooking. And so there was always that interest. And when I was then at this crossroads at Deloitte, I thought, well, how about I explore that? I could go to culinary school and start again learning that trade, or I could do what's called a stage in the industry, and
an internship.
An internship, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's very common in restaurants. And so I went to eat at Gordon Ramsay's Royal Hospital Road, which was his flagship restaurant at the time, a 3 Michelin restaurant, and I had a wonderful meal there. And I said, I'd like to meet the head chef. And Gordon Ramsay wasn't there that day, but his right-hand man who runs all his operations was. And I said, hey, I'd like to become a chef. What do I need to do? And he was, city boy, yeah? Yeah, come and work here for a day first, and we'll see if you can handle it. And so I was like, okay. So I showed up one day, had to buy a uniform, had to buy a knife, 7 a.m. start. We had a little lunch break for half an hour, and then we finished at midnight, 1 a.m. It was a really long day, and it was a fantastic day. I learned a lot. I saw a lot. I asked lots of questions. They were like, shut up. We don't ask questions here. I mean, they said it a little bit less politely than that, actually, but I won't repeat those words. And, but I was hooked. I thought, okay, I like this. And so I spoke to the head chef, and he said, okay, well, you weren't that bad, but maybe the 5th best restaurant in the world, what it was at the time, isn't, a best place for a novice to start. So let's start you in one of our hotels. So I got a job at the Savoy Grill, which was within the Savoy Hotel. And it was run for Gordon Ramsay Group by Marcus Wareing, who now has his own restaurant and also is the judge on MasterChef. And so I did all my training with the Gordon Ramsay Group for 3 years.
It's like it's a bit like an apprenticeship, like in Switzerland, you would do a Kochlehre, an apprenticeship, which would also be 3 years. That's amazing.
That's right. So it wasn't a structured apprenticeship as such. So, in as you say, in Switzerland and in Germany, this is very common, and this back in the day, this was a very common route to go into these trades. But I literally just got a job there, so I gave up my job as a consultant and worked. And the way the hierarchy is in these restaurants is very French and old school. So you start as a commis chef, and then you go on to chef de partie, sous chef, senior sous chef, and chef de cuisine. And so I had to work my way up the ranks, and it does take a good 2 years. But then in the 3rd year, I was lucky enough to get to go onto the F Word with Gordon Ramsay. It was his first sort of commercial TV series. And I got to work directly with him, and that was really exciting. And then the opportunity came to go to New York to open his new restaurant. And so as an American citizen, that was an easy choice for me.
So all those citizenships and languages do come in handy at some point, don't they? Because my kids grew up trilingual, and I also believe that when you grow up multilingual, you also easier learn another language because you already have this structure and this space in your head. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. Yes, I think some people might be more adept to learning languages because they're maybe more social and therefore will try. But you're right, it's a training. Everyone can learn another language. Everyone has to learn one language at least, and so learning the second one then triggers something in your brain that makes it easier.
An Austrian mother, an American father, 6 years in Switzerland, then studied in England, and then you went to Germany, and then in which language do you think?
I get asked that a lot. Do you get asked that as well?
Yes.
And my answer is always, I think, in the language that I'm talking in, because otherwise it gets way too complicated.
Yeah, I think so. I still count in German when I have to count.
Yeah. So I did that for a long time. I think I count in English because I did my education in English, especially mathematics.
Yeah.
So I guess I count in English because it's quicker. But if I'm counting orally in German, then
it's interesting, isn't it? Our brain is an amazing machine, and I also like people like us who are who are multilingual. It's everybody is always fascinated, especially people who only speak English, how fast we can switch. It's like, or we can say like in one phrase we can say 3 different languages, and it works. Everybody understand. Us people understand each other.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think there's a term for children that grow up in different cultures like that. It's called third culture kid, and it's become more and more common. And it's basically where parents to each a different culture, and the child grows up in a different culture as well. So you end up being exposed to 3 different cultures and therefore languages often.
Hopefully that will create maybe a less racism and better people in the world and better understanding in the world. But I want to talk about food and the world afterwards. I want to know something else first. How did you end up on Al Dente? Because you were quite a few years, I don't remember now, I didn't write that down, but you were on Radio Télévision Suisse Romande in a cooking show on the Swiss national television.
That's right. Yeah. I was a chef presenter for 5 years, and it was a really enjoyable part of my life. I really enjoyed that. The story of how I got onto it is nice, actually. I was always wanting to get into TV ever since I worked at Gordon Ramsay. I wanted to become, a TV chef. It was a little bit of a dream. When I was younger, I filmed a few demo videos and posted them on YouTube. So they were on YouTube, but I wasn't an influencer or into social media as I'm trying to be nowadays. So I didn't understand how it worked. So I wasn't building a following. It was just to have a reference point. And so one day I get a message from my cousin, and my cousin was working in Monaco at the football club, the AFC Monaco, and he was at the gala dinner, and he was sitting next to a lady who was married to the medical officer for the team. So he was obviously friends with the medical officer, or colleagues, and he was chatting to her, and she was like, "What do you do?" And they were chatting, and she was like, "I'm a producer on a Swiss TV show, but I live here in Monaco with my husband. I just lost a chef, and I'm looking for a new chef to be on the show." And he was like, "Oh, well, my cousin's a chef. Here he's got some YouTube videos," and he showed her, and she was like, "He's perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And he's Swiss." Oh, great. So I was living in the UK at the time, and so she contacted me. We had a little chat, and then I had a chat with the head of RTS for that division, and I was signed on. And so we filmed the show. We filmed all sort of, I think it was about 10 or 12 episodes per season, all in one go in July. So I flew out in July, and we filmed in front of a live studio audience. And then the producers edited over the summer and then released it in the winter. And so I did that for 5 years in a row. And it was a tremendous experience. It was a real family show, and a real family atmosphere also in the team behind the scenes.
Now I don't get it anymore, but I used to have Swiss television here in Cyprus, and it was on the German channels as well. I say with the same name. And I remember I used to, I think that I'm quite a good cook, but I used to learn a lot because it's a very practical cooking show. It's not one of those, those difficult ones. It's where you actually learn something basic that you can use and actually cook afterwards.
That's right. It was gamified a little bit. So there's a French version, or there was at least. There was a French-speaking version and a German-speaking version. I had nothing to do with the German-speaking one, only with the French one. But the French one was gamified. So there were contestants who could win prizes by answering culinary questions. But then there was a real big element of cooking where we presented a seasonal dish. And it was always a homey dish. It was something that you can recreate at home, or that was traditional. Like, in Spain, we did a Spanish paella. We did beef Wellington, which are fancy dishes, but these are dishes you can make at home. And then we made tagines and, casserole dishes, bourguignon, things like that. And so, and we did it step by step. It was broken up. So people who watched it always commented, "Oh, I tried that. Thank you. You gave me a new tip." And that was really rewarding to get that feedback from the audience about the show from the week before or the year before.
Yeah, I totally, that's exactly what I said. I did learn stuff, but also, like when I look at menus sometimes and I see when the menu is so long and there are so many different things in there, it just puts me off, because I go through and I don't have half of it. And I think, I don't know, but I think easy cooking, because we're all in a hurry always, or most of us. And I think that's also something you do. You teach people who have little time to cook healthy food.
That's right. I love cooking. It's been part of my blood for my whole life. And so I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family where my mother taught me a lot of things. But I think people are not always taught by their parents, especially cooking. It's kind of a lost tradition in some.
Unfortunately, yes.
We also live in a world that's very fast paced, where work becomes very demanding and we don't have time to cook. And we now are exposed to easier ways to feed ourselves through, food delivery, through ready meals. There's a lot of options and amazing restaurants, and that's great. But when you cook the food yourself, you know exactly what ingredients go in there. And I empathize with you with regards to, you know, looking at a recipe and there's like 20, 30 different ingredients. It becomes a bit overwhelming. And I think a lot of people, I mean, you're obviously a good cook, but some people...
I mean, I'm just a normal cook, you know, I'm not anything professional, but I like to cook, and I always used to cook for my family. But yeah.
And half of it is confidence, actually. And so I think a lot of people who don't have that confidence do get overwhelmed and decide, actually, I'd rather not try and cook. It's just so much easier just to get it in. And so that's what I've built, a coaching program to help busy people who are corporate, because I used to be a corporate myself. And so I know that the challenges one faces when one works sort of, you know, 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. and you run out of time, how to cook food that tastes delicious, because we all want to enjoy food. If we're foodies, so if we like going to restaurants, we want to eat good food, but that's also nutritious and healthy and filling and quick. And so you know, I've used my engineering background to come up with clever ways to be organized in the kitchen. I've used my professional cooking background to incorporate taste and professional techniques into home cooking. And I trained as a nutritionist during the pandemic when I had a bit of downtime to understand what makes a complete meal, what is healthy for us. And that's a continuous journey as well. I'm still learning about nutrition as one has to learn about everything. I think everything is always evolving. And so that's what I share with my clients, and I love it.
Well, yeah. And I think it's important also to understand that it's very satisfactory. I find cooking, even if I have very little time, but I find it very satisfactory when I actually make something and it's made by me. And I also find cooking with somebody a lot of fun. It can be a very bonding experience.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, especially with family members, it's wonderful. And so many clients cook with their children. So a lot of my clients are men, fathers, and they bring their children along, and so you see the child learning something new and bonding, as you say, and there is the reward element. I mean, you get to eat what you've created, so you get an instant feedback that you can, you know, self-criticize or have someone else say, oh, this is delicious, or could do with a bit more salt, but you get the instant results and satisfaction very often because, you know.
Yeah, and also talking about children, I think many people are afraid that their children could hurt themselves. You know, it could be either they could burn themselves or they could cut themselves. And I think the earlier you teach them, and you know, there are safer knives or there are safer ways. And when it's about heat, you just have to be there. I think you have to be a little bit more, how shall I say, you have to have the courage to let them make a mess, let them do it, because otherwise it puts them off. If you keep telling them not to do this and not to do that, I think you just have to let them.
You're absolutely right. And I think as a parent myself, there's a little fear element always. You always want to protect your children. And I mean, maybe this is a little difference between men and women. I think men very often are a little bit more willing to take risks, whereas women as nurturers and as mothers who've, you know, spent 9 months minimum, you know, creating this child are more protective and so want to remove as many risks as possible. But cooking, certainly in a home, is a relatively safe experience, especially if you're there to watch them. Yes, fire is a danger. Yes, knife is a danger. Yes, some machines could chop your hands off, but they're still there to be used, and with education and trying it in a safe environment is something I always try and teach my daughter. You know, when we're out and she finds something really scary or uncomfortable, I'm just there holding her hand, but she does it. And then when she completes it, I congratulate her, and you feel they feel a sense of achievement. And the same as with cooking. It's usually gratifying when you've gone through the slight tribulation of, oh, this is hot. Ooh, it's bubbling over. Okay. I stir it. Okay. And then it's ready. Oh, tastes good.
Yeah. I think, and that gives them confidence when you let them. I remember when my kids were small, and we used to invite the neighbors to make Christmas cookie, Swiss Christmas cookies,
Yeah.
and this kind of thing. And I remember my kitchen in the flour, and my kitchen used to look like a battlefield, but it was so much fun to let them use this dough and to let them use those little forms, and then to put it in the oven, and it doesn't take long, and then to take them out and eat them. I think it's one of the best memories that I have with my kids.
Oh, that's beautiful. And
Yes,
it's
yes.
interesting you mentioned mess. That's the second time you mentioned mess. And you're probably a very neat person that likes things very organized in a structured manner. So that must have been particularly hard for you to allow that mess to happen, but you see the benefit. And you're right. There's some people that I have an aunt, for example, she says, no, don't use those pans. We don't use those pans. I'm like, they're cooking pans. What else are you going to use them for if not for cooking? Because they don't want to get them messy.
What would life be all about if you don't use all the pans?
Indeed. Yeah. Or your kitchen, or,
That's a good one. So let's talk about the world. It's most memorable journeys. We talk about travel. What is your favorite? Do you have a favorite food area?
Ooh, it's a great question. You mean a cuisine?
Yeah.
So I get asked this a lot. And I always say Japanese food. I love Japanese food because it's a little bit like Italian food, but I mean, hear me out, because it's very different, but it's based on really good quality base ingredients, and you don't always have to do much to them to make them taste good. And so, sushi, sashimi is a prime example of this. Very clean fish, very good quality fish, cut perfectly, no seasoning, just soya sauce. And then obviously there's teppanyaki, there's meat dishes, there's different rice dishes, but it's very clean, tasty food that hasn't had too much process added to it. And I find Italian cuisine can be a little bit like that. A really good caprese salad, a simple mozzarella, and a really good tomato, beautiful olive oil. That's it. Delicious. And yeah, I think I grew up around. My mother obviously came from a farm. I lived just outside of Geneva. I grew up in a lovely big home with a massive garden and loads of fruit trees. And so when I was hungry, I just went out to the fruit tree and had cherries. I had apples, pears, apricots, plums, raspberries from the bushes. And so I was eating off nature's bounty, but not doing anything. I mean, obviously I like jam as well, but on breads, on sourdough bread, but then just pure fruit, pure vegetables, but just grown well at the peak of the season. It's beautiful. And so I appreciate that in every culture. So I mentioned Venezuela. When I was growing up, there was so much fresh fruit there, every exotic fruit you could possibly imagine. And at every corner, there was a fruteria, a fruit shop, and they had jugos de fruta, every juice you can imagine. So every fruit was juiced. And so I never had Coke in my life. Never. I don't drink Coke. My mother always gave me a fruit juice. Nowadays they're saying, well, fruit juice is also high in sugar. It is. But it's a little bit healthier.
Different kinds. Yeah.
And it's again in moderation. You don't have a liter of juice in one go. You have a little cup and you get your vitamin C, and it's enjoyable. And so when I was younger, I was always drinking fruit juice and eating fresh, like a whole fresh mango, just like that. Delicious.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can think of a fresh mango. And that's exactly the thing also. I think it's also important to eat what's there, what's in season, what is not all this, like we here in Cyprus, we get avocados from Peru. You know how long it takes for an avocado to come from Peru to Cyprus? It has to stop over about at least twice. So, what is your take on seasonal local?
I think we're finally coming back to that. We do live in a global world. I think it's a double-edged sword. It's wonderful. You get food from all over the world, and therefore, someone who hasn't traveled much gets exposed to foods from other countries, and they get curious. And there's also nutritional factors. I mean, no one grows avocados in the UK, and so avocado is a fantastic food. It's high in fiber. It's high in omega-3 fatty acids. It's got a ton of vitamins. It's filling. It helps regulate your weight. There's so many benefits, and we wouldn't have that if we didn't have globalization. Now, I do also believe in local and seasonal. And so it's maybe it's the 80-20 rule. You consume 80% local, seasonal, and 20% can come from elsewhere, but no one really measures that. So it's about achieving balance on that element as well. I think it's yes, there's the carbon footprint, and I think we should be conscious of that. And there's also a lot of waste, because sometimes these shipments come in massive quantities, and because that's how they come, and then there's a temperature change and some foods get lost. So I subscribe to a service that delivers it's called Odd Box. So the odd vegetables that don't quite look right, and most of them are locally grown, to be fair, but some are imported as well. So we get passion fruits, and passion fruits aren't that popular. So sometimes I'll have loads of passion fruits, but they keep a long time, and so I'll turn those into a little coulis or into a cocktail. And so it's fun to have that access, but you're right, we should be a little bit more conscious of.
Yeah. The reason why I mentioned avocados is because we have local avocados. We have lots of avocados, but it's season. They are like citrus fruit. They are ripe in the winter, and then we just wait until they come again. And that's, of course, I understand in countries where you can't have something, you obviously use imported. Tell me, when you travel, how do you choose your restaurants when you go somewhere?
Oh, I'm one of these people who likes to research something to death. And so with restaurants particularly, I love exploring. So if it's a country that I'm confident in, or I know that there's just going to be great food everywhere, I'm very happy to explore. If it can be a bit hit and miss, then I would research it. I would look at reviews. I mean, we this day and age, we can access everything instantly, and you get a good idea of a place. And I'm very visual as well. And so straight away, if there's, customers that are taking photo of the dishes, I can see from the dish, okay, it's that kind of cuisine. It's that much care has gone into it, or, you can tell a lot from real life images about a place. I'm less about atmosphere and decor. So one of my favorite restaurants in London is a hole in the wall sushi restaurant. The service is terrible, really unfriendly, but the food is delicious, and it's fast, and that's I quite enjoy that. It really depends on the occasion, the mood I'm in, but food is the most important element for me. It needs to taste good. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It just needs to taste good and be good.
And it can be very simple. Be very simple sometimes. Have you ever had a really, really bad food experience? What is your worst food experience that you ever had? Do you have one?
I certainly have had many, many bad food experiences. Two spring to mind. One is the chain that's gone out of business, I think, Garfunkel's.
That's probably why they're going out of business.
Yeah, I was a student at the time, and it was just terrible food, and everything had to be returned. But that was a long time ago. I try and erase bad food experiences. Obviously, there's the places you get food poisoning. That's terrible. It's difficult to sometimes trace it to a particular place, so I don't really remember those. But there was a train journey I took from London to Manchester, and stupidly I ordered a pizza on the train, and that pizza was just horrendous. It was flat. It was stale. It was way too cheesy, but the sauce was too sweet, and everything was wrong with it.
So, but I guess once in a while we just order a pizza on a train and then realize that we shouldn't have. That's fine. That is life. Do you believe that food connects people? Do you believe that we could have, if we made bigger tables and we ate more together, we could maybe get on better in this world?
It's a lovely thought. I think food is convivial. It is communal. I think it's very important for micro connections. So, a one-on-one dinner with your partner or friend is wonderful, because you can chat over food and spend time. I think as a family, it's hugely important. And again, it's something that's being lost, because a lot of conversations can take place around the table. I've been to a lot of gala dinners. I've catered a lot of gala dinners, and they're great social occasions, but you only get to talk to, this person and this person. Mm-hmm. So where's the benefit of increasing the table? I do think food is is a gateway to learning about a culture. And so you may know nothing about the other culture, but you get to taste their food and you go, I like this, or I'm not crazy about this. And you get an insight, and very often I think you're surprised by a local food, and it's interesting because it's slightly different. It's not something you're used to, or in the best case scenario, it very much reminds you of your childhood. And this is what some of the best chefs in the world try and do. They try and create a dish that will instill sensations of nostalgia in someone's
emotions. Yeah.
Indeed, as you take it to a bite and you go, oh, this reminds me of my mum's lasagna when I was growing up. And, you know, when I was sad, she made this for me, or whatever. And so that's hugely powerful. Whether it would solve conflicts and wars, I'm not so sure.
Maybe it would make them worse because people would be fighting over who makes the best. You know, like where I am, the same coffee is called Turkish coffee, Greek coffee, Cyprus coffee, Lebanese coffee. So, you know, it could create more problems.
And it has in history. I mean, there's, you know, the tea wars, and there've been wars over certain foods. Yes.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, because I've looked at the time and I told you those 40 minutes are going to just fly by. If somebody wants to learn from you or learn with you, and how does it work? Because, you know, if somebody listens to this now, and I told you at the beginning, I've got 127 countries now on this podcast, people listening from all these countries. How would they get in touch with you, and how would you do this? Because, you know, if somebody from Australia wants to know what you do.
Thank you for asking. I only currently teach in English, but I am looking to teach in other languages as and when those markets open up, if there's interest. And I'm on most social media channels. I'm very active on Instagram, particularly LinkedIn and TikTok. And so I give out a lot of free content there, some recipes, but mainly just knowledge about nutrition. And I want to share. When I learn, I want to share with people, because life is short, and you got to take action now. And so I share something called the Nugget of Nutrition. So I've got a newsletter that people can sign up to for free and hear that. And so that's through my social media. I've got links that lead to my website, and my program's called Cooking Smarter, Not Harder. And it's a 6-week challenge that people can sign up to. And it's a coaching program. So it's really to see if we're a good fit. If someone already knows how to cook and just wants to learn how to make the amazing beef Wellington and souffle, I'm not your guy. You know, I want to help people who want to get a bit more confident, who want to specifically get healthier, save time, maybe save money as well, because I teach a lot of techniques to bulk cook and where to buy, where to get good deals, and also how to get the most flavor out of food. And so if that's what someone's looking for, then check me out on cookingsmarternotharder.com and find out more about the program. Follow me on social media. I'm Gregory SJ on pretty much all social media channels. And I'd love to help people.
We will put your website in the show notes, because there is show notes with the podcast. And so here comes my last question. What does the family Schaad-Jackson eat on Christmas Day?
Oh, nice question. So coming from an Austrian mother, turkey was never really on the menu in the past. We used to have duck sometimes, or goose. That was my favorite. Some Austrians actually have fish on Christmas Day. Fish is quite a Christian symbol. And so we often had like a whole poached fish or goose. So goose was my favorite. I've done that a few times with my family, but being in England for so long, turkey is the bird of choice. And so that's what I've started eating and really enjoy if it's cooked right. And so I also teach ways of making turkey taste really juicy and delicious. and then how to reuse all the leftovers, because there's always so many leftovers after a turkey dinner. So you can make a curry, you can make a burrito. And this is where my global cuisine comes in, because it's very similar to chicken. And so there's a lot of options, and I like that.
Excellent, because that's one thing that I wanted to add before when you were talking about the coaching program, food leftovers. It's important to use. I mean, that's another thing that we do in this world. We throw away too much food, and we should not do that, because there are a lot of people who have nothing to eat or very little. So leftovers can be used. You're
absolutely right. And actually, it's an issue that's really close to my heart, food waste. There's 63% of global food waste actually comes from households. We waste 1.3 billion tons of food annually globally. The USA is one of the biggest, not the biggest culprit, but 63% comes from households. And so it's very often, we get offers in the supermarkets, we buy too much food, it goes bad, it goes in the bin, or we cook too much because we want to be generous. And then what do we do with the leftovers? So I love sharing tips on what to do with food waste, how to be clever with those ingredients. Again, my mother grew up on a farm, and farming communities are very good about not wasting anything. And so that, combined with Gordon Ramsay, who is also very cost conscious, always thinking, how can we reuse elements of each dish to either create a new dish or to feed the staff? I'm very conscious of that, and really don't like wasting food, particularly, as you say, because there are people starving, and we in the West have an abundance of food that we're wasting. Well, I think that's a perfect end to a wonderful podcast episode. Thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys today, Gregory Schaad-Jackson. Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been a pleasure. If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.